As I was editing this video, it's come to my attention that in this video, I repeatedly used the word substrate when what I should have been saying was something more akin to the OLED material. This is a great example of how difficult it is to be learning on the fly as you then are immediately communicating. Please excuse this somewhat minor mistake. It doesn't really change the overall direction and the meaning of the video, simply a wrong term being used. So keep that in mind as you watch. Thanks. As we continue to get closer and closer to the full announcement and then subsequent release of the Google Pixel Fold, hopefully May the 10th, we get all of this stuff unveiled, and then in June, we have the thing in our actual hands, which is going to be a very exciting time. And as we get closer and closer to that time, via leaks, we are learning more and more about this very exciting upcoming device. And one of the things about the Pixel Fold that we, up to this point, have known very little about is the screen technology. Now, I believe there was a leak very early on that stated it was going to be using an older version of Samsung's folding technology, something older than the Fold 3, and therefore would not have stylus support. Now, I must admit that at this very moment, as I am putting together this video, I cannot find that leak anywhere. I'm unable to remember where I saw this, so maybe I made it up in my head, but I'm pretty sure that was a real leak. Now, today's bit of news actually points towards the Pixel Fold screen being more advanced than what we have in the Pixel 3, 4, or even 5. So let's really quickly jump into this article via the elect, but we're actually going to be looking at Android Central's version of it, where they're kind of re-reporting this because the way they've distilled it down is a bit easier. This is translated and some of it's a little bit wonky, so we're going to go with Android Central because they've already done the legwork of sort of distilling this and making sure that it makes sense for me to read. So click on this link in the description down below to go give them a click for their work. This is a bit that's interesting. According to the elect, the Pixel Fold will use a new type of OLED display that will not be available in many of this year's upcoming foldables. The display will be known as M13. M13 is referring to the OLED substrate in this screen. It apparently is going to succeed Samsung's M12 displays. Even the upcoming Z Fold 5 will not have the M13. So it's very, very interesting that Google is using a newer OLED substrate than the Z Fold 5. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's turn to Bing because they always have good answers to these sorts of questions. I asked what was the difference between the M11 and the M12 because the M13 is yet unspecified. But from the 11 to the 12, the tech is supposed to give it higher luminous efficiency than its predecessor, which means it can produce brighter images while consuming less power. And you may actually remember back when the Z Fold, I believe 4 came out, that was one of the things that they hyped up a little bit about it, was that the newer screen was more efficient and therefore would just be better on battery life because of this new way of layering the OLED screen, basically removing a layer from it to allow the light to pass through more easily so that, again, it is more efficient. Now, this is not quite the same thing as that, right? This was just like changing the stack, I think, the way that, the things are stacked into the screen, whereas this is actually an improvement to the OLED part, the OLED substrate itself on the Pixel Fold. And I certainly hope I'm using all this terminology correctly. I am not an OLED expert. This is all stuff I've searched about and kind of researched in the last, say, 48 hours. Now, before we move on, I do want to take advantage of this last bit of this article just to serve as a reminder of the other things that we think we know about the Pixel Fold. Earlier leaks say it's supposed to have a 7.6-inch display that is 1840 by 2208 and will be running at 120 hertz. Okay, so this does all sound very, very good. That's fairly high resolution. 120 hertz is great to see as well, especially for those of us used to that with something like our Pixel Fold. No obvious downgrade there either. So how does all this relate to what I said earlier in this video that was using apparently an older version of Samsung's folding screen technology? Well, as far as I can tell, that can still be exactly true. You could use this newer substrate in an older version of Samsung's ultra-thin glass folding screen technology because these screens are built in layers, right? And the version of the screen that is in the Fold 3, Fold 4, and presumably Fold 5 has an additional layer in there to give it pin functionality. I believe they actually removed some unnecessary layers to make room to add this digitizer in, if I'm remembering correctly anyways. So if you add all of this up, it appears to me that the Pixel Fold, formerly known as the Notepad, which many people think the stylus was potentially coming, could indeed have a screen that is potentially brighter and more efficient than that is going to be on the Pixel Fold and even the Pixel 5, while still lacking the pen input support, the digitizer necessary for that. But this is, like I said in the beginning, a very interesting bit of news because it basically means that Google is using a bit of Samsung's tech before Samsung uses it. We've seen Apple do this before, right? We've seen Apple iPhones use OLED screens from Samsung using a newer version, a newer M version of these screens than what Samsung is shipping on their new devices, which is kind of interesting as well. So I guess basically Google is going down that route as well as Apple. You could also see this as Google basically testing these new screens out for a Samsung. So maybe that's something that you're going to be slightly worried about, but I guess you should only be worried about it to the degree that you're worried about it when Apple does it. So I don't think it's like a potentially like a big issue. I doubt the Samsung's going to give them something that's going to turn out to be like really bad or something. But it's just interesting to see Google now doing something like that with a first gen device already, also testing out this new technology. Maybe there's some really good benefits there to battery life and things like that, and that's something that they feel like they couldn't pass up on. It's hard to say. Hopefully we have all of this stuff ironed out early May 10th or so with that Google I/O event. You're going to want to be subscribed right here to this channel because I'm going to be live for that event. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch together with everybody. So hit that subscribe button before you leave. I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.